That is a look I'd never seen from her. And it's a look that I would never want to wish on even my worst enemy. Hey, welcome back to my channel. My name's Marcus. This is Black Boy You Need Therapy, where we're gonna run through all the reasons why every black man needs a therapist. And I'm gonna use my experience over the last year being in therapy and hopefully inspire other black men to hop on board. Today we're gonna talk about how keeping silent about depression is killing black men. It really is. And it has been for a really long time. So sit back, let's talk about it. Let's start to heal. Just like before, if you like this video, go ahead, smash the like button, hit subscribe. And if you really like what we're doing here on this channel, make sure you click the link to my Patreon and become a patron. So today we're gonna talk about how black men, how we keep so silent about our depression, and it's killing us in many different ways. And opening up about depression, even though it's difficult, it is very, very difficult, is something more and more of us need to do to save ourselves, to save our families, to save our communities. I mentioned in my last video how showing vulnerability is often viewed as a sign of weakness. And even when it isn't, even when we aren't being outwardly told that it's a weakness, it's something inside of us that we just can't help feeling. Trust me, I know, I'm no different. There's been a lot of talk about how we need to open up more and show our vulnerabilities, but there hasn't been a lot of acknowledgement as to how difficult that can be. Being vulnerable, even to people that you care the most about, is hard. It's really hard. It's something I've struggled with my whole life. And I'm sure if you're watching this channel, it's something that you've struggled with yourself and still struggle with. I think part of it is we feel like we've just given this person power over us in some way. And you know what? In a way you have, because you've given this person a very personal part of yourself that potentially they could use against you. We find this happen in relationships. You know, you get into a bad argument and the first thing your spouse or your significant other does is that they throw your most vulnerable moments back in your face. And that makes you not want to open up to anyone. I've certainly been there. I'm sure most of you have as well. At the end of the day, it's still worth it. And if you don't feel comfortable opening up to people closest to you, this is why you need to go get a therapist. The main point of a therapist's job, besides helping you deal with your emotions and your traumas and helping you sort through the mess of your life, because all our lives are messy one way or another. Besides that, the main role of a therapist is to be non-judgmental, to be objective, to support you where you need support, but also to hold you accountable when you need to be held accountable. One thing that we have to realize also is that depression in black men presents itself differently than it does in other people. Oftentimes in black men, it presents itself as being overly aggressive, bravado, hypersexuality, because those are the only emotions, the only presentations of emotions that we're allowed, or that we feel we're allowed to show to the outside world. And these presentations do nothing to solve the problem. In fact, it's only making things worse. One of the first symptoms of depression in black men is anger. Yeah, that's right. I said it was a symptom of depression. Anger. Anger is the go-to emotion for so many black men. I mean, my entire life, I can bring up countless boys, men, teenagers who their go-to reaction is to snap. Their go-to reaction is to cuss somebody out, get into a fight. My father definitely fit this role. His go-to reaction was to cuss you out, to raise his voice, to throw things. When it came to me and my brother, it was to give us whoopings. When it came to my mother, it was usually to storm out, accuse her of spending too much money or sleeping with someone else, and then go to the bar and get drunk. So what does this anger do to black men's families, to our spouses, to our significant others, to our children? What does it do to the community? We project our pain onto the people that we're supposed to love and protect. And all that does is that it feeds this trauma loop that never ends. We pass our trauma on to our children, and our children spread it out through the community themselves, and they in turn pass it on to their children. Another symptom of depression in black men is loss of focus. And this is something that I know a lot about. Now, I'm a writer, and I've been writing really my whole life. But for the last few years, I really struggled to get anything written down. What often comes with that loss of focus is losing interest in things that once brought you joy. I'm a martial arts instructor. I'm a writer. Those two things bring me endless joy. After a long writing session, whether it be good or bad, my mood is always lifted. But for the last several years, especially while I was still struggling with the guardianship, my writing output just went down and down and down. And same thing with martial arts. I've been teaching martial arts for 20 years now. Oh man, now I feel old. So anyway, I can't think of a time when I haven't been excited to go to the dojo. Teaching, whether I'm teaching an advanced class, whether I'm teaching the kids, the beginners, the intermediates, the dojo has always been my second home. It's been the place that I go to when I'm feeling down, and I always feel better when I walk out. At one point, I realized now, at the height of my depression, I couldn't muster the energy to go to the dojo. And when I went to the dojo, it felt like work for the first time in 20 years of teaching. When I looked on my calendar and it was my time to go teach a class, I would shrug and roll my eyes. Oh, I do not feel like going. More and more I felt like this. And it wasn't until I started therapy that I realized that that was a sign of depression. Another symptom of depression in black men, probably one that you're not surprised by, is substance abuse. So many of us, we use, whether it be alcohol, whether it be weed, whether it be harder drugs. A lot of black men, we use whatever tools that we can to numb our pain. My father was definitely a functional alcoholic, and the bar was his refuge. He would go numb the pain and come home only to pass out, get up 4 hours later and go to work. And I'm ashamed to say, at the height of my depression, I did my best imitation of that routine. And that brings me to the last and probably most serious symptom of depression, and that's suicidal thoughts. Suicide is the third leading cause of death for black males between the ages of 13 and 25. And I mentioned in my last video that I know all about this, even though I was definitely older than 25. I came to therapy because I had a bout of suicidal thoughts that wouldn't go away, that caused me to seek treatment. And I guess the best way to start is to start from the beginning. In 2008, I became the legal guardian of my mother. My mother was diagnosed with vascular dementia. She'd had a few mini strokes, and as scary as that was, her dementia was mild. And it still is to this day. Everything else was the same. Her long-term memory was great. She could talk all day about her favorite movies, her favorite novels. So when I became the guardian at 25, I thought, no big deal. I can handle this. Just put all the bills on auto pay. Make sure she doesn't leave the oven on. Guardianship will be a breeze. Yeah, I was in for a rude awakening. For those of you who don't know, being a guardian of a parent or a grandparent can quickly consume all your time, all your emotional energy if you don't plan correctly. in the beginning, and I most certainly didn't. Because becoming a guardian to a disabled person isn't just about keeping the bills paid. It's about maintaining their estate. It's about lawyers. It's about making sure their debts are paid. It's about their mental health. A lot of the elderly, especially the disabled, are very, very lonely, and they struggle with loneliness and depression themselves. And my mother most certainly did struggle with all those things. And being a guardian is also about dealing with other medical issues that crop up later on. A couple years into guardianship, my mother started dealing with mobility issues. She went from walking on her own to walking with a cane to walking with a walker. She started to have incontinence issues, which required maintaining adult diapers. It required cleaning her bedding every day, every morning. It required making sure she gets regular baths, which had to become more regular after she started soiling herself. And dealing with her mental health was very difficult when she started soiling herself in public. The first time me and my brother, we took my mom to the movies. I don't remember what we went to go see, but all I remember is her having an accident and me not caring. Me and my brother, we don't care about embarrassment. We don't care about what other people think. But seeing the look on my mother's face, the look of shame when she soiled herself, is something that I wouldn't want to wish on my worst enemy. And I could barely contain my tears at that time. That is a look I'd never seen from her. And it's a look that I would never want to wish on even my worst enemy. Being a guardian is hard when you're 25 and you barely have a grasp on your own life, your own finances, your own goals. And I realize now I wasn't ready. Her health started to decline in other ways. I mentioned her mobility issues. I mentioned incontinence. Then in the summer of 2017, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and for which she had to have a double mastectomy. Everything was falling apart. We were just barely keeping up with the mortgage. And it all came to a head in 2018 when the court decided to remove my guardianship. They weren't happy with the way that I had maintained things. She was still deep in debt, as she had been when I took over as guardian. And I didn't do a good job of alleviating any of that debt. The house was going into foreclosure really soon, and I'd let everything pile up. Her debt, her health, and I felt like 10 years out of my life had all been for nothing. My number one goal at the beginning of taking over guardianship was to keep her out of the nursing home. And just to put the rotten cherry on top of a shit sundae, my girlfriend of almost 4 years picked that exact time to break up with me. I never congratulated her on that timing. That timing was impeccable. And I realize now that the biggest problem I had was that I wasn't talking to anybody about it. I wasn't talking to anybody about my trials and tribulations of guardianship. I didn't talk to anyone, not my friends, my family. I didn't open up to anyone about the difficulties I was having, and I was having a lot of difficulty. And that led me to November of 2018. I felt like I'd failed at every level. I felt like I went to bed the night before at 25. I'm getting short stories published. I'm getting good feedback from editors. I have a whole novel completed. And my future was right around the corner. All my goals, everything I wanted was right around the corner. And I woke up the next day pushing 40 with nothing to show for the last 12 years except for failing my mother, failing my family, and failing in my relationship. Now, I've always been a hopeful guy my entire life. I've always looked on the bright side. But for the first time in my life, I felt like there was no hope that anything would get better. And that led to my suicidal thoughts. And that led to me calling the suicide hotline and starting therapy. The best decision I've ever made. So where do we go from here? Well, we have to start healing. We hear this word so many times. Healing, healing. We need to start healing. How do black men heal ourselves? You know where you start? You start by opening up. You have someone you trust in your life. It could be your best friend, your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, a relative, a close friend, anyone. When they ask you, are you good? And you're not, tell them, I'm not good. And for those of you who can't, take that first step. Find a therapist and start the road to healing.